So I'm Bruce Schaefer. In a few slides, we'll all introduce each other, so I might say more then. So, of course, this is coaching a first LEGO League challenge team during the pandemic. So here we are with introductions. I've been involved with First LEGO League pushing 20 years. For the last several years until about 6 months ago, I had shifted focusing on First Tech Challenge. But now I'm back heavily involved in First LEGO League, not as a coach, but as a workshop guy and etc. And been associated with ORTOP for a long time. Right now, my association as a volunteer and a member of the board. So, Megan, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Megan Babbitt. I am the education specialist for ORTOP. I began that role in August of this year, so I'm pretty new. I did coach a team down in California several years ago for First LEGO League. And my role at ORTOP is mostly based on my experience as an educator. I've been in K-12 education, particularly K-8, for the last 13 years.
And Debbie Kerr, ORTOP's Director of Programs, is with us. So, Debbie, you want to say hello?
Hello. I don't have my video on. I'm sorry. I have been with First as a parent volunteer, and then I had various roles over the years, but I've been with ORTOP for 8 years and love this program. First as a mom, but yeah, that's what got me hooked. It's a great program. Glad you're all here with us.
Bruce, let's have everybody put that into chat so that we can all see it.
So if you click on the plus next to chat, you should be able to type into chat. And I will open my chat so I can see what you type. As I mentioned, questions and discussion are encouraged. Your choice of microphone or chat or both. And we know that the subject doesn't end at 1 o'clock or whenever we adjourn today. So you have my email address because I sent you an email with a pointer to the PDF this morning. And if you need Megan's or Debbie's, just drop me a one-line email, but I'd be happy to field questions or refer to you to resources or people that can answer your questions or concerns. The goals we have for the season relative to the pandemic is to keep the kids and their families safe. I think we all have pretty equal access to public policy recommendations and hopefully the policies of schools where the kids are going to school. And inevitably, it's up to parents. Since most of you will be acting as coaches, you'll want to stay in close touch with the parents and respect the concerns they have about the safety of their children and their children's families. We also have a goal, of course, to try to provide as much enrichment in spite of these challenges this season. I won't elaborate on all the enrichment opportunities of First LEGO League Challenge, but I think you're generally familiar with those. But in addition to the educational enrichment, there's the fun of doing Legos and doing the research and the presentation, etc. So we need to balance all of these goals in this challenging season.
Okay. So we're going to jump right in to talking about how the events this season will work. And one of the things that you may have heard from us in emails or on our FAQ, on our wiki, is a conversation about these remote events and particularly the remote hub that First has developed. And the goal of using the remote hub is to have as close of an experience remotely to what we would have in person. In-person events are still preferred. We still think that kids and students and volunteers will have more engaged time if we can have in-person events, but we also are aware that that may not be an option. And so we're preparing to have remote events for the entirety of this season, and we'll only bring in-person events back when it's safe. So the remote hub that FIRST has developed is online, and it means that all of the judging, all of the scoring will happen, some of it in real time, some of it asynchronously on that digital space, on that virtual platform. So the remote hub would also allow for a hybrid of remote and in-person activities if that was something that makes sense with safety precautions. But either way, teams would have are going to have access to playing fields still. So ORTOP is looking at ways to get access to those playing fields everywhere that they need to be, and then the judging would be done remotely, and that would be true for hybrid events or for fully remote events. So in terms of uploading, the remote hub has areas to upload, and specifically those the uploads would be for videos and also portfolios of the engineering notebooks. And the videos would be some of them will be videos that are of practice matches, so that judges or referees are able to tell your team, okay, you need to have a different angle here, you're missing an angle, or your lighting is obscuring some portion of the robot, we can't see what's happening. So you'll have that kind of practice option to make sure your setup is going to be ideal for the actual event. And then in the event, there's going to be a time limit during which uploads will need to happen for all of the teams. So each team will upload 3 separate 2.5-minute videos, and these again mimic those matches that you would have during an in-person event, and they all need to be recorded within the same 6-hour window, and then also uploaded within that assigned window, so that it is as much like a live event as possible. It is all happening within that same period of time. Then referees view those videos, they score those videos, and of course your teams have that opportunity to discuss with the referees in person about scoring, because that's where a lot of the learning happens during these events, right? Is those conversations with referees about not only the scoring, but what it is that a team might look to do differently or better next time. There's not a leaderboard during the event. I think that is a difference between live events and remote events. So at the end of the event, there will be an awards page, and teams that care to can go to a rankings page to see how their team did in comparison to other teams. But that's not something that's going to be live during that 6-hour event. So we've provided you with a tiny URL that is the new rubric for judging. To be clear, this rubric, which comes from FIRST, was going to be in place this year, pandemic or no pandemic. So it's not that they've come up with a new rubric just for the remote event. This is the rubric for this year that was planned. This link is also available on our wiki. It's available to you in your PDFs, and I'm going to go ahead and drop it into chat if you want to click over to it now or have it for later. So before the event, right, teams are going to be asked to submit their innovation project, particularly videos, documentations, PDFs, whatever it is that they have going into the conversation with judges. And then on the day of event, there will be a 30-minute synchronous conversation, so real time, in that virtual space to discuss the innovation project, the robot design, and also core values. So again, that I believe mimics a live in-person event in that there's preparation ahead of time. You submit or you have your documentation ready to go. You have your poster board or whatever it is that your team has put together, and you're ready to have those conversations with judges on the day of.
Should we take
yeah.
a pause and see if there's questions so far?
Sure. Questions? Are all three together? All three of the matches at the same time? Is that what you're asking, Jeff?
Or the three kinds of judging, probably.
Yeah, the three kinds of judging.
Yeah, that was a change they decided to make this year before the pandemic existed. There had been some concern in past years that at venues, the kids spent a lot of time finding judging rooms, queuing up in front of judging rooms, etc. And they decided, since it's supposed to be all about the kids, that they would arrange for judges to have expertise across all three subcategories, and the kids would go to one location at the venue for a 30-minute period, and it would be roughly divided 10 minutes per subject: the robot design, the core values, and the innovation project. So that's implemented this year. We'll be implementing it remotely because the judging will be done remotely. Other questions about remote judging, remote events, hybrid events? Okay, don't hesitate to type a question in chat or just shout it out. And back to you, Megan.
Okay. Yeah, certainly if you think of a question in the following slides, please do let us know. We're not attached to not going back if you think of something cool. Ask. So awards, trophies, medallions, certificates, that sort of thing will be mailed to coaches, and there'll be a remote awards ceremony as well. So we have a very tentative schedule. Hopefully this schedule will be less tentative in the next week or so. I know Debbie and the entire programs team have been considering some actual dates. So we're hoping to get some specifics to you as soon as we can. But here's our broad strokes, right? Registration is open until December, actually. So it's not just throughout the fall, it's into the winter. So if you're waiting to register your team because we're not sure about social distancing protocols in the schools, or you're not sure about where you can meet or how you can meet, you do have a little bit of time. You have an extended amount of time to register your teams. And so that'll be open both on the first national platform and ORTOP through December. Our competitions will begin, so here it says winter 2021, that's end of January, beginning of February probably. So that's, again, if you wait to register your team, you'll still have a solid, we are hoping for 2 months to work with your team if, for instance, you don't register until December and then you don't start working together until January. Our season ends in the spring of 2021. That's with state championships. And we're looking at sort of a mid to late spring for that date. And then world championships are through the first national program, and they have said to us that those are likely to happen in July or August of 2021. So it is an extended season, and that's really to allow us to be as flexible as possible given social distancing requirements, and also because we'd like everybody to be able to get together. And if we can have a live event by putting it off until late spring, that's what we'd like to be able to do. So we may extend some of these dates further, right? So we may push things out. We're not going to push things earlier. And we're also aware that a number of coaches are committed to more than one first team. And so we keep that in mind when we make our schedules. And that's something that we've heard from a number of people, are concerns that because the the event hub is remote this year, that they're going to be unable to fully serve the multiple teams that they are leading. And we know that that's happening, and we're keeping it in mind. So we're going to jump from the remote hub now into a conversation about the kind of logistics of actually coaching a team, of meeting with students during social distancing requirements during this pandemic. So the very first thing that is going to be really important for your team is for them and you to understand what are the norms and boundaries, what are the expectations of working together on remote platforms. So because of the age of the students that we work with, you want to have that communication with parents, and you want to have that communication with students. So with parents, some of the conversations that are coming up, and this is happening both you know, on an individual level, and we see it being played out in the media, we see it being played out in concerns that are more global than just first, is a worry about screen time. Because our kids are spending most of our kids are spending a lot more time on screens than we would normally see. So you want to set with those parents, with your parents and with your kids, what are those expectations, right? How much time are you thinking that the kids are going to spend on the screen? If you are adding, you know, a meeting or 2 meetings a week, and it's screen time, it's, you know, it's time where they're Zooming with you, or whatever platform you choose, how is that being balanced by the engagement that they're going to have, by the interaction that they're having with their teammates? And in that same vein, what's the accessibility of that screen time for them, right? If you're getting together with your team in the afternoon and evenings, and that's when parents are doing their work because homeschooling has happened during the day and now they need to work, and do your teammates have accessible screen time, and is that, you know, is that something that you can work out with the family? And also, as much as possible, and this is harder the younger the kids get, we want our students, we want our team members to be independent in their use of the technology, right? We want them to have that sense as much as possible that they're entering into the space that's theirs. So one thing that we see a lot in schools now that there's a lot of homeschooling happening or remote schooling happening is we see more interaction with parents than we ever did in the classroom, right? It is not typical for a middle schooler to bring his mom to class with him, but I have absolutely had, it was a great moment where I was running a class, and one of my students' moms brought his breakfast into him and then stayed for the rest of the class. And that was lovely, but also really cut into, I mean, the difference in my student's participation and in his willingness to be completely who he was normally in class versus who he is at home, right? We all do a little bit of code switching, and that is something that you want to think about when you're setting up your meetings and when you're talking with your parents about whether or not they're going to be in on the meetings with you. That being said, parents are partners, right? So we also want to make sure that they feel included and helpful. So Bruce this morning, right, said, look, we want to record this session, and one of the things that he did is he asked for permission, and that works really well when you've got grown-ups. Kids are a little bit harder. So it is tempting to record a lot of sessions or a lot of meetings, because if somebody can't make it, you can say, oh, just watch the recording. But here are some things to think about. First of all, when you are recording minor, there are some pretty serious protections, as there should be, for those images. And so you need to make sure that you have permission, and that you have that in writing for liability reasons, and that you're keeping those recordings in a very safe place. But the other question is, what is somebody who's not there, if they're ill, or if they've got a conflict, or if their internet isn't working, what are they going to get out of watching a 1 hour or a 2 hour team meeting that they can't participate in because it's not in real time? So if there are other circumstances, under normal circumstances, if a team member misses meeting, we might give them tasks, right? We might say to them, hey, here's what we worked on and here's what I want you to work on, or what your team needs you to work on for later. But we wouldn't say, here's a video of everything that happened. Now take 2 hours out of your time and watch it passively. So, so just think about that when you think about whether or not you want to record those meetings with your team. And then, of course, with parents, again, just remember that they're in partnership with you for our team members, for our students, and trying to figure out what it means to support kids during this time is an ongoing conversation. Before I get into the norms and boundaries with students, I'm just wondering, and you can give a shout out with your microphone or you can put it in chat, how many of you are in education or work with students in another way other than FIRST? Because that's going to give me an idea of how detailed I need to go with setting norms and boundaries online with students. Okay, so we've got coaches. Anyone else? Okay. So with students, one thing that we work on with students throughout elementary school is online etiquette. So the idea that just because you're online doesn't mean that you get to behave in a way that you wouldn't behave on the playground or if you were face-to-face with your friends. And sometimes even when students are interacting with people that they know, right? It's not strangers, they're not hiding behind an avatar or a screen name, they still can be a little disconnected from their peers, and that can lead to some behaviors that we wouldn't normally see. So, I mean, bullying is a strong word and not where most of our students end up, but we want to make sure that we emphasize that everybody's work is worth looking at, that you don't erase people's work if you're on a shared document, that you are giving time to people who might need a little bit more time to respond, that just, you know, that sort of online etiquette matching our in-person behavior with our friends and peers. We also, again, with students, those norms and boundaries have to do with availability, online safety, right? We're expecting this year to have a lot more interaction on the FIRST forums and on other platforms where students engage with each other. And we want to really emphasize that even though the space is as safe as we can make it, we still want our students to be careful about revealing personal information online. And then other things to think about are really the basics of ergonomics, right? If they're sitting at their screen all day at school and then they want to come and sit at their screen and have a team meeting, let's get up and do some jumping jacks, or, you know, run around whatever room they're in and stretch a little bit and make sure that they're not going to give themselves, you know, a headache or a neck ache or shoulder pain from sitting at the computer all day. So when we are looking at what we want students and team members to be able to do, we want them to be in this space where they're pushing themselves. So the graphic right now that you're seeing is called Vygotsky's Zone of Proximal Development, is ZPD. And the main takeaway from it is, we all have things that we know how to do confidently on ourselves. We all have things that we are unable to do yet, right? Where it's too far out of our current skill set and we're not ready for them. And in between is that ZPD, something that we can all do, but we might need a little help, right? And for students, that's the sweet spot, because that's where the learning is happening. So you're not asking them to do something that they're unable to do, but you're also not asking them to do things that they can do without thinking about it. So as much as you can, keep it interactive, right? Keep the kids playing, keep them talking to each other, use breakout rooms, have them screen share documents, use the chat, and share responsibilities. Make sure that the students, the team members are the ones that are doing the work, not the adults. Also, as much as possible, students need to move. So one of the kind of axioms in education is you don't ask students, you don't ask kids to sit and listen without moving for more minutes than they have years. So if you're working with 10-year-olds, you've got under 10 minutes until you need to get them to move around so that their attention can reset. It doesn't have to be big, but like I said, you know, stand up and stretch, have a 30-second break to wiggle. Something like that really does help reset the attention. We're all going to notice screen fatigue this year. It's something that's already happening. And just give some time and talk about that a little bit with your kids so that they can recognize the signs and symptoms and ask for a moment to move back, right? And that includes things like having them turn off their cameras and still be with you listening, but maybe they're not right in front of the screen. And that's okay, and that's healthy as long as it's a conversation. So another thing to think about is how much, if we want to get them into that ZPD, how much can we not tell them? How much can they explore and learn on their own? And with that comes something called flipped instruction, where you might give them a skill to learn and have them learn it not with you, and then come back having watched a YouTube video or having looked at a series of pictures to learn how to do something, and then come back and troubleshoot it with them, so that your time with your team is interactive, their time with each other is interactive, and not passive, getting information. And just to be completely clear, the pedagogy that we've been using today for the last 30 minutes is not good pedagogy for kids, right? Bruce and I have been, well, mostly me, I've been talking at you for 30 minutes, and that's not a good plan. So as much as you can, get the kids talking, get the kids doing something, so that they are engaged and in the time that you have together. And then I've just got a couple of things for you to think about. So Bloom's taxonomy is a way to think about what you're actually asking students to do. Are you asking them to remember, which is kind of rote memorization and recall? And then as you go up the pyramid, it's a more complicated cognitive process. And we all of our brains are going to grow and synthesize information better once we get into the green and yellow and red zones, as we're starting to apply and evaluate and create, as opposed to just remembering things. And that goes the same for DOK, for depth of knowledge, right? What we want is we want to move past just the memorization of facts and skills into the using of those facts and skills to create or to make something new. And that's the strength of the FIRST programs, is that we're asking kids to be really, really active in the way that they're approaching new information and new skills. So Bruce, this one's yours.
Thanks for the reminder. I'm back. You're going to need to think about what I'm about to say relative to the age of your children, the children on your team, that is. So I'll speak to you as an adult and trust you'll make that adjustment. Google Drive allows you to share files, which could mean that a team that has developed a program and saved it to the disk of their computer a team member could upload that to Google Drive, and another team member could take over that program by downloading that file and using whatever software they're using, whether that be the EV3G or the newer Spike Prime or the even newer EV3 classroom software. They all allow for saving on disk, and therefore you could upload those files to Google Drive. Dropbox is, of course, a competitor of Google Drive, as is Box. So those are the three different ones that I know about. There's probably another half dozen out there for sharing files. In a minute, we'll also talk about co-editing using those technologies with a focus on co-editing with Google Docs and with Google Slides. The software that is available, there's now 3 different kinds of software. I can get into that if you have questions about what the 3 kinds are, but they're all available without owning a kit. You're going to need at least 1 kit. If you can afford more than one, that could be useful, especially during the pandemic. But each family can download the software that your team is using onto a family computer, and that should help with sharing during the season. There's also a special website for sharing EV3 programs called ev3hub.com. Makes it really easy for teams to share their EV3 programs. I haven't checked to see if it makes it equally easy for Spike Prime programs. I'm going to guess it does, but I haven't verified that. And then a much more sophisticated system, but would have a significant learning curve, is called GitHub. And that allows you to track changes that have been made and to see what those changes are and check out changes and check in changes. I would not recommend that for younger teams. There's a chance that 8th graders, maybe 7th graders could learn that, because it is something that is used quite often with First Tech Challenge. And so it may be in the kids' future, and the older kids might want to look into that, especially if you have an adult associated with your team who can research that in advance. I've only used GitHub just a little bit, and I still find it confusing. EV3 Hub would be my recommendation for almost all First Lego League teams.
Here is a shared Google Doc that we've set up, so you can see that we've got 2 people on here who, because we're not all signed in, are going to show up as anonymous alligator, anonymous mink. You've probably used shared Google Docs in your professional life or in your own education or at some point in the past, but one of the things that we can do, and here's our shared slide deck, is we can actually all choose to drop things into these decks or into the docs. We can also comment on things. So I want you to take a couple of minutes, not too much because we're at 12:40 right now, but just a couple of minutes to practice dropping things in, making comments on other people's comments, and see what it looks like to co-edit a document in real time. And that'll give you a sense of what kinds of norms and boundaries you need to set up with your team members, right? About not typing over each other, about responding to comments, or being able to comment politely, right? Giving constructive feedback and not tearing people down. All of it is in line with our first core values. So hopefully it all seems relatively familiar. And Bruce, there's a question in the chat that I think is definitely you.
Yeah, I'll just type the answer for everybody.
Okay. Okay. All right. So you guys seem like you are pretty up on how to use Google Docs and Google Slides. So Bruce, I'm going to hand it over to you for the second half here.
So in a normal season, the kids tend to build robots at team meetings. With some teams, the kid goes home with a particular kid, and they do more building, and then they bring the kit with their creations back to the next meeting. Getting together is doubly challenging this season. You may have a way of having team meetings, perhaps when the weather's nice outdoors, but having the kids all around a single table sharing the same Legos may not be wise, and I probably recommend against it until we're all vaccinated. So what can you do instead? Well, the main thing is you can try to share the responsibilities across the kids, but not all at the same time. And you can create specialties. And we'll be getting into that on a later slide. This slide focuses on how might technology be handy. And I'm nominating 4 different ways that you can actually design and, in a virtual sense, build a robot right on the screen. I've dabbled with a couple of these. There's a learning curve and getting used to it. It's a lot easier to grab some Lego bricks and plug them together. But some of the kids may enjoy doing it on the screen because it's kind of cool in its own way. You can pick from a wide variety of bricks and plug them together to create robot creations on the screen. The first one I list here is fairly sophisticated because it's version 2 of something that's been going on for a while, and it's connected to a website called BrickLink. Should your team decide they need a part that's not in their kit and you've got the time to order it, BrickLink allows you to order specialized parts. You still have to stick within the Lego realm and make sure you understand what the Lego restrictions are. I don't think you're allowed Lego hydraulics or pneumatics. I forget what that restriction is, but generally if it's a Lego part, it's probably legal, although it could be expensive to add many bricks. But you don't have to use that ordering facility in BrickLink Studio. You can just use the design facility and restrict the designs to parts that are already in the kit. I'm under the impression that the creators of BrickLink Studio are actually the people that also created LDCAD, but that program is available separately on the website I referenced next. And then because that second one only works on Windows and Linux, there's one that's specific to the Mac called Bricksmith. And then there's one called LeoCAD, which is on 3 platforms. And then there's a review that I found that does compare and contrast of all these, and you may want to read that review before you go too far into playing with these various options, your choice. I wish I could tell you that I have a strong recommendation on one or another, but I don't have enough experience to have an opinion. Any questions about that? I can't see chat, so Megan can read a chat question, or you can just shout out your question if you have one. Because we've been dealing with professional and social interactions for several months during the pandemic, many of us have learned Zoom or one of the Zoom competitors. Your favorite may not be Zoom. There's plenty of good ones out there. Your favorite may either be the last one you used or the one that worked best for you, or perhaps you've not used any of them yet. If you haven't used any of them, here are links to videos on how to use Zoom. The first 2 are for teachers, and the third one is how students can use Zoom. So 2 different perspectives. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find one that talked about how to use Zoom to coach an FLL team. So you'll have to extrapolate from what I did find, or perhaps you'll find things I didn't find by searching YouTube or the internet more generally. And if you have another platform that's easier for you to access, then you may find YouTube videos about those alternative video conferencing platforms. Any questions about that? So I alluded to this a few minutes ago. At the top level, you can think about how to divide the season's work between robot designing and building, robot programming innovation project and core values. During a normal season, we recommend the kids do all of this. Each kid does all of these. And that's still our recommendation, but during COVID, compromises may be needed. And to the extent that you can think about how to get kids focused in particular areas, perhaps rotating the roles or focusing in a particular area for a while and then going on to another area, may give you a way of managing the pandemic challenges while still getting the kids involved in the enrichment that First LEGO League Challenge provides. So the next slide drills down further, and actually there's so many subcategories that I thought of or other people have suggested that I end up creating 2 slides so the font doesn't get too small. So in the area of the Lego robots, you could brainstorm with the kids about which role they would like to do. Or maybe you have a sensor specialist or an attachment specialist. If you're new to Lego Robotics, there are various basic designs for the robot moving around, usually with a pair of motors each driving a wheel, and oftentimes instead of having 4 wheels, there's a caster that makes it easier for the robot to turn with by only driving 2 wheels. So you could have a specialist that chose which of those designs and how to improve a basic design for the season, and that specialist or another person could develop improvements. But another team member or 2 or 3 could be in charge of attachments. With all the different missions on the 4x8 playing field, the kids might decide that they're going to work on 4 of those missions initially, not all of them, and maybe 1 or 2 kids work on 1 or 2 of those missions, and 1 or 2 kids on other missions, and they may discover they need different attachments for different missions because of the mechanical nature of each mission will vary. So a different attachment to the robot may be appropriate. Sometimes that separate attachment will have its own motor, and unless you have a lot of motors in your kit, that will be challenging. But I've also seen designs where you mount a 3rd or a 3rd and 4th motor on the robot, and then the attachments connect into that motor via a gear. And so different kids can design attachments that use that gearing mechanism to drive that attachment. And that attachment might be pushing, pulling, lifting, grabbing, delivering different things that the attachment might do. Another challenge that we run into every year is how to reliably navigate on the field. The first thing the kids might think of is navigating by time, but we recommend at the very least they navigate by rotations because time to get somewhere may vary according to friction and how charged the batteries are. Navigating by number of rotations is more reliable, but even that will often end up that they only actually get to the exact place that the robot needs to go 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 6 times, and that'll be pretty frustrating for them. So the sooner that they learn how to mount and program sensors so they can use those sensors to detect where they are on the playing field, the more reliable they'll be. As the kids do more programming, they're going to find sequences of blocks in the programs that they're going to use multiple times. And when they discover a better sequence, they don't want to have to go throughout all their different programs and make the change over and over again and find that they forgot to fix something in one place or make the improvement in another place. So there's a feature in all the different languages that are available for the EV3 and Spike Prime. In most cases, that feature is called My Blocks. In the professional world, that's equivalent to subroutines or procedures. That's a way of encapsulating a certain number of steps into a kind of a super block, and then using that super block whenever you want to do those steps. And We have other workshops that get into that further, but I want to kind of motivate how you could have a kid specialize in that area and become the expert about my blocks. Then on this next slide, we get into some of the other ones, other aspects of First LEGO League Challenge, researching the problem, researching possible solutions, building prototypes, sorry for the abbreviation there, prototype builder. That's a reference to, in some cases, the kids will actually build their idea for the innovation project. They might build it out of cardboard and using a glue gun, or they might do a two-dimensional model of it or drawings. So it could be the model drawer or the cardboard cutting specialist, you name it. There's different ways that the kids could specialize and work from home, and perhaps use Zoom or some other technology to share what they're doing, and the other kids could look over their shoulder and say, have you thought about doing it this way? And that could also apply to programming and building a robot. One kid may be hands-on with the scissors and the glue gun or the Lego parts or the programming, and the other kids can look over the shoulder and give them suggestions or ask them questions. Testing their prototype would be another potential role. Designing a skit or directing the kids through a choreographed skit. It's also good for the teams to think about how they deliver their solution to other audiences, to test their ideas on people that could use their innovation project solution. So one of the kids could be the outreach manager. Normal times that might be making appointments to visit people or scheduling time to make presentations at a location. During COVID, it might be an online interview or an online presentation. So I imagine I've only scratched the surface of the different specialties that the kids and you might develop during the season. Any questions about this notion of kids being specialists and perhaps later in the season rotating those specialties? Any comments? So this expands a little bit further on techniques, rotating the roles including some of the ones I mentioned on the previous two slides. There may be a way of looking into the kit or kits that you have and coming up with baggies of parts that the kids can use for their attachments, or just as a team bonding exercise where they all build something fun early in the season to kind of warm up to the fact that Legos are fun, and or kids could request, I need one motor and I need some of these, and well, the adults should not be the ones building the robot. The adults in these circumstances could be the one putting together a kit, making sure the parts are clean, putting them into a clean baggie, and leaving them on the front porch for a parent to pick up, or perhaps delivering them to somebody's front porch, or whatever is appropriate in your team's circumstances. While it's natural for the kids in a normal season to get heavy into trying lots and lots of different ways of building things with Legos, because Legos are fun. You may want to temporarily reduce the emphasis on building with Legos and choose a fairly standard design, or focus that part on one or two kids, and spread the programming around, because we got things like EV3 Hub for sharing programs and uploading and downloading programs, or using Zoom or other screen sharing technologies for the kids to work together on programming may be a lot more feasible. Likewise for core values exercises, for the innovation project, etc. Another way of using video technologies is to interview experts, particularly on the innovation project, and potentially as part of their outreach and core values. Questions or thoughts on this slide? Again, the coaches and mentors should not be doing the work, but they can assign work. You can suggest to kids watch particular videos that you might discover on YouTube. Make sure they're appropriate for the kids in terms of age and subject matter. We've developed a wiki, an ORTOP wiki that is primarily for the coaches, but you may discover material linked to the wiki that is quite appropriate for the kids. And there could be other wikis like Wikipedia that the kids should be reading particular articles that relate to this year's sports theme. You can assign the kids to develop summaries of what they discussed during a Zoom call. And then that could be either individual work or collaborative work using one of the collaborative tools that we talked about earlier. Normally we think about the kids using poster boards and paper that they cut out and paste. There may still be ways of creating physical posters this year, but you may find yourself also suggesting to kids online technologies for doing things equivalent to posters because the judging is going to be remote. So being able to share the result of their creativity online will be part of the judging process unless we all get vaccinated before all that judging occurs. So as we get closer to whenever those qualifying tournaments are, you're going to want to shift the kids to preparing themselves for those remote events. Make sure that if they aren't already experienced with video calls, that they do that in preparation for judging. You could have a kid serve as a judge, or maybe 3 or 4 kids serve as judges and interview the other kids about their robot design, about their programming, about their innovation project, or perhaps another team that you're in contact with could serve as the judges for your team, and then you switch roles for your team, serving as pretend judges for the other team. So there's a variety of ways that the kids could get ready for remote or hybrid events as those events get closer on the calendar. Thoughts on this subject? Anything in chat, Megan?
Nope, we're pretty quiet.
Okay. Another thought is that while you as adults are not doing the work, it is appropriate to do a certain level of project management, particularly for the younger kids. Ideally, you'll develop project management skills in the kids themselves, particularly the older kids, and get them to design their own schedules and divide the time for that into productive use of the time for each meeting. But you may want to lay out a rough schedule, take what we've shared with you and updates that we'll be sending you about when the qualifying terms will be, and think about how you might divide the weeks and months between now and when those events will occur, so that it can be a gradual learning, a gradual enrichment process, and leaving plenty of time for fun for the team. You may also want to reach out in your community for others to help, probably online, but there may be people that have more time than normal because they're not going skiing maybe as much, or whatever other winter activities or fall activities they have. So you may find people that would be otherwise hard to track down or available to you. First Tech Challenge and First Robotics competition teams are encouraged to contribute to the community, and one way they contribute to the community is to help First Lego League challenge teams. Unfortunately, I don't have a way of introducing you to those teams because the contact information for those coaches is considered confidential, but you may have your own way of contacting older teams in your community and enter into some collaboration there for everybody's benefit.
And that came up in the chat just a little bit, which is it can be a challenge to connect with other teams, and we are working at making that somewhat easier, but as Bruce just mentioned, there are some privacy considerations. So for now, if you're looking for particular support from FTC or FRC teams in your area, go ahead and email us at ORTOP, right? You can email me, you can email Debbie, and we'll see who we have in your area who's told us it's okay to send out their contact information. And it is a silver lining of pandemic and virtual meeting life that our geographic location is less important now than it used to be, that we have a lot of ways to connect people that aren't just literally next door.
Yeah, you might find experts or teams that are willing to help that are in other states. I attended a amateur radio meeting where the guest speaker was in England, but not something we would have in a normal meeting, but was technically feasible because we were online anyway.
So I am aware that it's 1:04, so we don't want to take up too much more of your time. I am dropping into the chat a Padlet link. Padlet is one of my favorite ways to collaborate in a virtual space. And if you follow that link, you'll see a Padlet that I set up that is that's a place where we can drop anything to talk about what idea are you going to try coming out of this workshop. So please take some time today and share with us your thoughts coming out of this workshop. And Bruce, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that was perfect. Anything more to say on this slide?
No, I'm going to go ahead and put my email, Bruce's email, and Debbie's email into the chat if you don't already have it. And we will also capture the chat before we end the meeting so that all of the links that we've put in there are available to you once this meeting is closed.
We know that many of you have other things that you're now late for, so thanks for your attendance. We'll stick around for a few minutes in case anybody has additional questions or concerns before we close the technology for today.